أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Resuming the discussion, we stated that there are vertical axes and there are horizontal axes. On the vertical axis, what the Prophet taught was a sense of purpose, a sense of growing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a sense of becoming liberated through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this was in sync with our human condition. Nothing in this universe of God, at least in this level of existence, the one that the eyes can observe, for as far as they can observe, defies this principle of growth, self-realization, and evolution. He understood well that the human community, human individual, human intellect, and the human spirit need to evolve and to self-realize. That was the purpose he stated for the individuals. And he said that goal is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fullest level of liberation. Religion is a process that brings you through gradual takes you through a process of gradual liberation. So religion is always on the vertical, and that is why Islam in the Quran is always defined on the vertical, not on the horizontal. Ismail, Ibrahim, Yaqub, Musa, Isa, Hawariyun, they are all known as Muslimun. Their Sharias are not given any part in terms of that salvation which is known as the real Islam. The Sharias that these prophets gave were all seen on the horizontal level. The horizontal level is only there to support the vertical level, and the horizontal level changes as the human community changes. So the horizontal is in total state of flux. The vertical one is the essence, the horizontal one is the form that can always change in order to accommodate newer forms of growth. The vision that the Prophet of Islam had was a very accurate godly vision. He saw a human community coming to the completion of its journey on the face of this earth, and hence he factored those things inside his Islam. He kept his Islam minimalistic, in the sense that if he were to give laws upon laws, they would stifle the growth of the Muslims. So he kept minimalistic laws in Islam. Two, the Quran kept the law system very ambiguous in order to allow for reinterpretation from era to era. The whole of the Quran is like this, whether in its theology, in its cosmology, or in its legal regulative system. All of it is ambiguous. That is why people would go to Imam Sadiq and say to Salamullah alayh, why is it that we find that the Quran speaks to us in every era? The Imam said the Quran renews itself. Of course the Quran does not renew itself, it's the same Quran. It doesn't renew itself at all. What renews itself is the human learning. The more we learn, the more we are able to access the Quran in a more accurate fashion. It was unthinkable for the Arabs to have understood the Quran in the way that me and you understand today. That verse that we often cite, and those who do not believe in Allah, we constrict, their hearts are constricted as if they're ascending a lofty mountain. Now they understood it in a metaphorical sense. The anxiety that the heart encounters at not having anyone to rely on, trust on, to not have any faith or any belief. They interpreted that verse purely on psychological grounds. or spiritual. Today we know that when we climb a lofty mountain, there is variation of pressure, ratio of air, and we feel physical constriction. The Arabs never would have understood this. In the same way, so many verses that are understood now by us that were never understood previously. By tomorrow, when the next generation comes, they will understand them far better than we do. The Prophet understood this. That's why he gave minimalistic Islam. Minimalistic. Now on that note, before we clarify a little bit further, let us give an example. Allah prescribed 5 salah in Jama'at. He said, pray it 5 times if you can, pray it 3 times if you can't. It's fine, take the liberty. The main thing is that the human mind is at ease, human community is at ease. They have the liberty to improvise and grow with it. And what is it said about the Jamaat prayer? Do it swiftly, do it very fast. Because communal, social spirituality is something different to individual spirituality. When you are alone, then in that case pray slowly, devote yourself. It's an individual act. It's not a collective act. The collective acts are always minimalistic. And that's why the Prophet of Islam said, little bit of sunnah is better than a lot of innovation. When you innovate a great deal and it stifles you, this is not good. Doing little bit of sunnah with your heart and with your minds, and as you're growing, is far, far better. Going back to this vertical and the horizontal, we stated yesterday that the whole issue of abrogation forces us to rethink. If the Quran is eternal in the literal capacity of its regulations, then why did the Quran abrogate itself? An eternal word abrogating an eternal word doesn't make any sense. But we find the same thing has been happening. In the whole issue of abrogation, we clearly see the essence and the vertical line, that abrogation has always occurred in order to accommodate the vertical. If the human being has been given a particular way of living, and that is no longer productive at a newer level of its existence, it is abrogated. So its essence is reformulated once again. Now the charm of the prophetic system was that he, within the horizontal mundane axis, intertwined the vertical. Do you not see the laws of Islam? Even the most mundane, buying and selling. If you don't say qurbatan ilallah in buying and selling, your sell transaction is fine, isn't it? But what does the Prophet say? He shrouds it in the vertical, in morality, in godliness. He says, when you sell, give more, take little. Do not lie, remember Allah. Make the intention that this is for Allah. If you do not give, if you give zakat and you don't make the intention of giving zakat, the zakat will still function, wouldn't it? It will still feed the poor, shelter the homeless, educate the uneducated. Zakat's function will still be there. But the Prophet insisted, and later on Imam Ali, that do not ruin zakat, place it on the vertical, make that beautiful intention, so that zakat is bringing about growth in your individual being, together with serving the community. So together with the collective spirituality and growth, let it bring growth inside you as well. Now on that note, what we stated yesterday, we stated that the horizontal axis has to be in flux. If that wasn't the case, Musa would not have changed Ibrahim's Sharia. Isa would not have changed Musa salamullah alayhi Sharia. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would not change the Sharia of Isa. Can I share something without offending anybody? You know, sometimes I say Muhammad Rasulullah and I don't say sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and people get offended. There is nothing to get offended about. Yes? When Sahaba went to the Prophet, they didn't say, "Oh Messenger sallallahu alayka." They said, "Oh Messenger." Yes? If we had to say sallallahu alayhi wasallam formalistically all the time, then by priority we should say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah jalla jalaluhu. And this formalistic aspect takes us away from Allah and the Prophet. The hearts are supposed to be clean. I love my Muhammad Rasulullah. He is my father, my mother. I live for him and I die for him. So if sometimes I don't say sallallahu alayhi wasallam, does not mean I don't respect him. Every drop of my blood yearns for my Prophet. What I'm saying is we can't become so formalistic that we start feeling offended. Yes? As Rumi says, I will do this tomorrow. I did not say inshallah for you, but my whole being is based on inshallah. Just because I did not say it from my lips at that point, does that mean that I'm saying that anything other than what Allah wants can be done? Of course not. Nothing can happen without the consent of God. So yes, be formalistic, but not to the level that it stifles us. And if I were to take the name of all the prophets of Allah in this lecture, the salawats will predominate, which is not a bad idea. I'm not saying it's bad to recite salawats, but then the lecture won't come in. Maybe you might feel that that might be a better idea in the first instance. Who knows? Salawat. The subsequent shariahs would not have abrogated each other. The horizontal axis has to change. It is inconceivable. We talked about Quran being pragmatic. What does it mean to be pragmatic? It means to apply its eternal truths in the context that is immediately available. The context that is immediately available is not the context of angels. It's a context of humans. And these humans are uneducated, unsophisticated. These humans are confined to one or two places in the land. The Quran has to formulate its vertical axis in accordance with the context at hand. There are limitations within the context, contextual limitations. These contextual limitations makes Quran pragmatic, that it has to, in accordance with these limitations, formulate the vertical axis on the horizontal level in accordance with the way these people understand. But at the same time, give a hint of what lies beyond. And this is why Quran is minimalistic. This is why Quran is ambiguous, to allow for that growth, for that reinterpretation, a constant process of evolution and a constant process of growth. That is the whole secret of it. The Prophet said, I leave two things with you, the book of God and my progeny. Out of the two things, two weighty things, the book of God is heavier and my progeny is a lesser weight. Now the Shias get offended. I'm saying, no, don't get offended. The Prophet was not talking about the spiritual ranks here. How can you compare the spiritual rank of a heart with the book of God? The spiritual rank of a heart is well beyond the book of God, right? As Ali ibn Abi Talib said, when they lifted the Quran upon the spears, he said, as the Quraysh disbelieved in the revelation, these people have become disbelievers in the meaning and interpretation of the revelation. The real Quran is Ali ibn Abi Talib's heart and soul. It's not that paper. We know that. So when the Prophet said that the Quran is heavier and my progeny is lighter, what he meant was that the Quran is less contextual. The progeny is highly contextual. When people came to Imam Sadiq Salamullah alayh, he did not give them universals, he gave them individual laws. When somebody said, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, what should I do? He said, okay, you do this. These are individual laws. The Quran does not say do this, it gives principles by and large. They are less contextual. And that is why we find from Imam to Imam, sometimes there's a flux in the way they interpret the law of the Quran. Because the progeny is highly contextual in a given situation where they have to give immediate answers, extrapolate them from the Quran and give it. Whereas the Quran is more broader, more universal in its horizontal axis. So the Prophet was only talking about the horizontal axis, not the vertical axis. That the progeny is a lesser weight. What that means for our discussion now is that the Quran is sufficiently ambiguous, sufficiently minimalistic for every era. And I know you're going to ask me what happens in the absence of an Imam, and we want to deal with it in the last lecture. What happens in the absence of an Imam? Who then extrapolates? Who understands what it all means? Well, that is what we mean, that the progeny will fix the horizontal axis, but the Quran will leave the horizontal axis very loose. That's the only thing we've been talking about, nothing else, so that that evolutionary process continues. So as the human mind grows, The sophistication dawns upon the human community as we talk about globalization, as we talk about inalienable human rights, as we talk about global culture, that what we are coming to today. Islam is able to accommodate this. There is no longer a sense of paying jizya. The world is no longer on the former paradigm of Muslim land and Kafir land. In accordance with the former paradigm, we have the fatwas, yes, that you can't go to a non-Muslim court to retrieve your right. And if you were to retrieve it, it's not yours. That fatwa is based strictly on the paradigm of Muslim land and land of harb, the land of war with Islam. Land of Islam, land of Salm, and land of harb, yes? The land of the Muslims, the land that is at peace with the Muslims, so honor their laws, and the land that is at war with Islam, their laws have no value, go and cheat them, weaken them, because they are the enemies of Islam. That paradigm is no longer existent. It's a different world. We have nation states now. In a nation state, if there is a righteous court of law with righteous principles where you can give testimonials and prove your case and retrieve your right, that is your God-given right. It is only in the former paradigm that you can say that you can't refer to a non-Muslim law court. But a Muslim law court and a non-Muslim law court are both supposed to be dealing on the principles of justice and righteousness. So if a non-Muslim law court is dealing on the basis of justice and righteousness, it's as Islamic as Islam can get. As we said a few days ago, there is no such thing as Islamic economics, Islamic banking, Islamic politics. It's human economics, human politics, in which religions give the principles of noble human existence and fair play and growth, and we formulate and reformulate. We cut, chop and change, and we grow. And the Islamic system will allow for that. So now, in the new world, there is no place for jizya. These are nation states. There is no place for stateless citizens. Like if Islam became global in the way me and you understand it, the majority of the world will become statusless, because we can only accommodate the Abrahamic faiths. We can only accommodate the Jews and the Christians, right? Or the Zoroastrians, or a few more here and there maybe. But the rest of the humanity, the Buddhists and the Hindus, will have no status, not even through jizya. This is not what Islam was all about. The Prophet understood. He had that beautiful vision for the future. So he gave us a growing reality. Now we stated this yesterday, that the Prophet initiated the discussion on the horizontal axis. He did not conclude the discussion on the horizontal axis. This is the huge failure of the Muslim mind, in which they revert to the time of the Prophet to interpret what the Prophet was doing. And for them, the Prophet had come and sealed the horizontal axis. We are saying this is an impossibility. The Quran itself used to abrogate itself. Musa abrogated Ibrahim. Ibrahim, Isa, Musa, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam abrogated Isa. So if that's a historical trend, are you telling me it's going to come to a stop after the Prophet of Islam? The Quran begins to abrogate itself. The Imams at times reformulate the laws. Of course, it's a continual process, it's a fluid state. It has to continue. The failure of the Muslims is they are stuck in an era 1,400 years ago. So today, if you bring me the modern contract, what will I do? I will say to you, in the time of the Prophet, this was the contract, and therefore this contract is valid or not. How nonsensical is this? The Prophet did not invent contract. The contracts already existed in the context of the Prophet. Prophet was born in a community that transacted. They already had contract. The Prophet did was he instilled the principles of fair play in that contract. Isn't it sheer nonsense for me to say these new contracts that are coming up now in the global economy, which have no precedence in Islam, that I will deduce its law from Islam? It's unheard of. Where are our minds gone? Where have they gone? Or there is no such thing as capitalism in Islam, there's no such thing communism. I'm asking the people, please, where was it in Islam in the first place? This mentality to stick on the horizontal axis as it was in the time of the Prophet is causing us the misery that me and you are encountering. as opposed to promoting growth, it is stifling growth. Each and every soul of 1.7 billion Muslims will beat their chest and say, by Allah, Islam has the answer. We know this. They will say, by Allah, the Quran has the answer. They will say this. But then their minds are baffled. But where is the answer? Can you not see this? Quran, Islam, the way it's understood right now on its horizontal axis, is something that stifles growth, creates division, creates intolerance. Whereas your intuition inside there, in your hearts and in your minds, the God that speaks to you in there says, no, my religion has to be the one that promotes growth, promotes greater social harmony, promotes greater good, promotes harmonious coexistence. Your intuition is saying one thing, and you are saying that my God cannot be other than this. As a litmus test, the reason why the Muslims have to argue their case so much is because it's not rational. If something is rational, you don't need to have arduous arguments. If I were to say you are najis, yes, then I will have to prove how you are najis. If I were to say you have the same dignity as me, I won't have to prove it because we are both equal humans. But if I were to say you have less dignity than me and I can steal from you, I'll have to prove it to convince people. And rationally it's impossible. But yet the Muslims delude themselves. Have you seen 1.7 deluded minds who know intuitively that this is not right, but still they're deluded? How strange is this? How strange is this? Now, it is not all lost. The Quran, on the one hand, talks of the vertical, and on the other hand, talks of the horizontal. And this is a key into resolving the problems. Before we go further, this is a key in resolving the problem. Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood in Makkah and pronounced the most universal verse ever to be pronounced on the face of this earth. Yes? There is no verse that equals this. My God, it leaves nothing, no doubt in any godly mind that this is a godly man and his Quran is from God. He says, "O people, we have created you," this is a verse of the Quran, "we have created you from man and woman, made you into tribes and nations, so that by mutual interaction," look at the beauty of this verse, "you are equal as man and woman. Your production into tribes and nations is a natural growth, yet you're supposed to mutually interact, so that by mutual interaction you may begin to understand that the best among you is the one who is most God conscious." He's not saying, "Oh Muslim," he's not saying, "Oh people of the Abrahamic faith," he's saying, "Oh man, oh humans." It's the most universal verse ever. Another universal verse, "La ikraha fid din." There is no compulsion in religion. Free minds have to come to religion. Minds cannot take birth inside religion. Minds have to be free. They have to be free to think, to challenge, to find their destiny. They have to become God-centric of their own accord. This is another universal word. Man qatala nafsa fakannama qatala nasa jami'a. Another universal verse. He who kills a soul has killed mankind as a whole. Do not cheat. Another universal verse. Do not steal. Another universal verse. Be good to your oaths and your contract. Another universal verse. We have all these universal verses. In the Quran they are not restricted. Then you have the verse, "Do not befriend the Jews and the Christians." And as opposed to that, you have the verse, "The most people, you will find that the ones who love you the most are the Christians." You will find that the Christians, their eyes filled with tears when they hear the truth. You find these verses in conflict with each other. If we then were to look at them in the universal ones, we will say this, "Do not befriend the Jews and the Christians," came only in the context of Medina, at a particular time only. If you were to look at the course of Revelation, you will see that that is a verse. If the Prophet was here today, he would say, "Do not transact with mullahs like Arif, because he sees me as somebody who is a fraud." I'm not, yes? You guys have a tendency of being naive, salawat. Does that mean every mullah is bad? Yes, it does. Most of them are not good. What I'm saying is, you have universals, you have particulars. When you start weighing them up, you will see that those ones that curtail humanity and human growth are always in a context. And if you were to compare them against a universal, you will see that these are momentary ones. And me and you are abrogating those verses. Somebody asked, Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam initiated the movement of emancipating slaves. He died without banning it. Who does it now? Me and you, with our brains, will do it now. We will say that the existential scheme right now has evolved. It is no longer valid. Who will talk about the rights of women today? Me and you, in a relativistic scheme. In different eras, it's different rules and different regulations. Every era has a different modus of operation, mode of operation. Because it's relativistic, provided that that vertical is intact and provided we see no finality to this horizontal axis. Now, in the laws that the Prophet gave, we can see a variety of them. We can see the laws of devotion. We can see laws of consumption. We can see contract, buy and sell, marriage, whatever else. We can see the laws of how to preside over cases, bearing testimonials, judging, so on and so forth, establishing case, blood money, viratha. Apart from devotion, that also fluctuates. Allah gives fluctuation even to namaz. He says, if you are fleeing, then pray whilst you are running. The essence of namaz is not ruku and sajda. It is ruku and sajda when you are on earth and when you are in safety. But if you are fleeing, then the essence of namaz is not ruku and sajda. It is that sentiment and connectedness with Allah. Run and pray. On horseback and pray. In car and pray. In plane and pray. Pray. Uphold the essence. But when you are on land, then do ruku and sajda. Face the qibla. But when you're in space, on the moon, if you try to do ruku, you'll be somersaulting. That doesn't mean that you have to do wudu because the water will fly away. Are you not seeing this? But he says, let's say devotion we don't touch save to the extent to which the Prophet has touched. Consumables, Allah is very adamant, very, very adamant. Do not eat maita. Do not consume blood. Do not consume pork. Do not consume the animals slaughtered on other than the name of Allah. Fine. He is very particular because we know that they have values in them. We know the consumables have values. Whatever we eat impacts our souls, our psychology, our consciousness. I don't have time to give examples for this from the time of the Prophet, but there are. However, the method of dhabiha can be discussed. But what to it, what not to it, cannot. But method of dhabiha, I've written an article, and if the Muslims haven't become fed up of me so far, they will after reading that article. But when it comes to contract, and that is everything other than ibadat and consumables, all of that is in a state of constant flux. Apart from items that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has specified hard and fast. Allah says, do not commit zina. It is a gross indecency. He's saying this. Don't do it. But when Allah talks about inheritance, when He talks about the rights of marriage, when He talks about capital punishment, when He talks about other such things, here we see that they change with the changing of the community in accordance with the vertical. They all change. So then the Muslims should not say that when they are in a state that they have to enact Muslim laws, in which case they want the Sharia law within a non-Sharia country. There is no place for this. It is supposed to be a fair distribution, accuracy of bearing, of proving or disproving cases. It is all about that. Proper sale contract. In marriage, how unimaginable is this that a woman can't get a divorce from a man? Who can even understand this? Will you be able to appeal to the modern woman to come towards Islam when she is told that you can't divorce your husband, he can walk away from you you will have to cry to your mujtahid for 2 to 4 years before he divorces you. It doesn't make sense. So the horizontal axis, apart from ibadat, which are fluctuating, apart from consumables, which are highly fixed, apart from those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is totally fixing, the rest of them are all of flux. And therefore, this is what I say, that if we are in a Western country and the method of distribution of inheritance is a particular one that is as Islamic as Islam can get, there is no conflict between that and between Islam, unless somebody knows that the state system is extremely unjust or unfair, in which case we can make provisions. If we don't see the state system as unjust and unfair, then going by them, it's as Islamic as Islam. So therefore, outside the scope of consumables, ibadat, and the things that Allah has specified and His Prophet has specified categorically in the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet, that we know are from the Prophet, without any context binding them, everything else is in a state of flux. The reason here is that it needs to accommodate a growing community. It needs to accommodate an evolving community. It needs to accommodate communities that want to bridge the gap. Then this brings us to the next topic, which obviously I'm going to initiate today and continue tomorrow and the day after. You see, the Prophet and the Quran speaks about different communities coexisting together, because this is the reality of life, and this is the ultimate eschatology, the ultimate end that we are striving for. We will mention these hadiths towards the last lecture, that the end is a noble, glorious end. Religion has to cater for that end. Religion has to actually spur on the human sentiment to the arrival at that end, where the human community, through its variety, is harmoniously existing, where the souls are evolving and are benefiting each other. Religion has to make this possible. Religion cannot make this possible with a law system that stifles the growth, or divides people, or makes them judgmental, or gives them the feeling of exclusivity, or even the arrogant feeling of inclusivity. Religion cannot be this. Religion, in the rightest sense, on the horizontal axis, in accordance with the vertical, has to be pluralistic. It has to be pluralistic. It can't be otherwise. So now, look at the beautiful way in which the Prophet addresses this thing. He comes to Medina. He constructs his ummah. It has Muslims, a lot of Jews, and people of non-Abrahamic faiths. And he constructs his ummah out of them. All of them are based on the principles of human morality. To a great extent, God centricity. Mutually benefiting each other. They can have their tribal laws operating for them. They can resolve their own cases within their community through their own norms. But at the greater level, the ummah identity embraces them as a universal culture. This was the absolute hallmark of human existence, that we will never ever lose our individuality. We are all different, but we come together despite our differences in small communities. And then we come together as a nation, all the communities come together, and we have a notion of citizenship. And we come together as people who subscribe to uphold whatever resolutions have been passed by United Nations as a global community. This is the absolute truth and reality of the matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caters for this. He says Kaaba is that universal place for the Muslims. But incidentally, read the verses about the Kaaba. Find me a verse of the Quran that says Kaaba is for the Muslims. You might find one, but majority of them, masabatan linnas. Kaaba is a place of return for the people, mankind. Kaaba, by and large, in the Quran has always been addressed as a place for mankind to come together. It is going beyond the organized faith of Islam. The Prophet of Islam factored this into his community. And that's why when the Christians of Najran, when they came to him and they said, look, we have lost the rational argument against you, we have lost the spiritual argument against you, but we still want to be Christian. He smiled, he said, be Christians. And the Quran said the Christians will go to paradise. Look at the praise Quran gives to the Christians and the Jews. And look at the times Quran gives Jannah to the Christians and the Jews. Time and again. At least in the first 5 surahs or 4 surahs. Apart from Fatiha, Baqarah and otherwise. Baqarah and onwards. So the Prophet understood that the system has to be dynamic. The horizontal axis has to be very dynamic, very flexible, that allows for this natural growth, that allows for the changing of society, that allows for maturing of the human mind, and adds to them and to their growth very, very meaningfully. If you see, the people after the Prophet, they were far more confident than we the Muslims. When the Hindus began to transact with them and the trade was opened with the Hindus, don't ask me for a reference immediately for this, the Hindus were given a status and they were working with each other. They were that broad. When the Bani Umayyah in the later ages, they started conquering Athens, they imported their knowledge. Bani Abbas were the patrons of this knowledge, the import. This is how broad the Muslims were. And this was only made possible by the teachings of the Prophet and the Quran. I will stop there, my time is up, and take the questions, and inshallah we will continue the next 3 nights that we have. 3 nights? 2 nights. The next 2 nights, and inshallah we will continue with our topic. Basically this question says that you have said that the one group that goes to paradise, if at all this hadith is sahih and we are understanding it properly, then that would mean that people from groups of Daesh as well will go to paradise. Let me clarify myself. All the sects that are God-centric, that are moral, that enjoy human values, those readings of Islam will all have people that go to paradise. If there are Muslims who pray namaz day and night, fast day and night, do hajj day and night, but whose hearts lack love, mercy, care for other creatures of Allah, forget the Muslims, any creature of God or even an animal, those people cannot make it to paradise because they've created their own hell. A person had brandished his goat on the nose. The Prophet looked at it and he said, the master will go to hell for doing this to the animal. Heartless people don't go to paradise, whether they are Shia, Sunni, Salafi, whoever they are. Yes? Now, I know from the Salafis people who are extremely good. I know from the Wahhabis, when I go to Saudi Arabia, people who are very, very good. They are very misconceived about the Shias, but they are good people. And after they find out, they actually have tears in their eyes. And they say, look, I'm so sorry. I was swearing at you, at your face, and you never said anything. There are so many of such people that I sit with, I eat with, I bring them back, and when they find out that, oh, okay, you are of this maslak that we were swearing, they actually become tearful, and they say, look, we want you to meet with our priest and our Maulana. So, I don't think we can judge people, yes? I don't think we can judge people. So even if somebody is following the ideology of Ibn Taymiyyah's ideology is not corrupt to the core. He has many aspects of truth, and in many places he has created a lot of problems. He has created huge problems in areas, I can't deny that. But in many instances, he has said things which are all reasonable. But Ibn Taymiyyah is not that brilliant human thinker either. He's one of according to my reading, he's an ordinary thinker. Allah has given him so much predominance within a community, that's another thing. But when you try and look at a scholar in his scholarly capacity, he's not that sort of a brilliant mind. But many of the things that he's saying do make sense. Read them. I don't think this is also a right attitude, that we just become so insecure that just because he's Ibn Taymiyyah, we curse him lock, stock and barrel. It's like our community. We curse the Bani Abbas Khulafa, don't we? For what they did. That act of theirs was horrendous. It was a bad act. But what about all the other good things that they did? By us not learning history due to these biases, who's being cheated? We ourselves are being cheated. Look at the other things that the Bani Abbasi have done, the Abbasides have done. They are very, very good, noble contributions. Whatever their fate, they will burn in hell for killing the imams, that's fine. They burn in hell. But at least they did this much good. If we can understand what good they did, it is our heritage. The human good is my good. I'm just asking us to come at a pedestal of that broad understanding. Become true human beings. Become real human beings. Yes? But there are double standards. Truly there are double standards. When it comes to Genghis Khan, we don't hate Genghis Khan, do we? He was the most detestable person. He killed and massacred. But we are objective enough to look at him, to say, okay, he did bad here, but here he did good as well. We have that level of objectivity because it does not personally relate to us. All I'm saying is have that level of objectivity. It says that all Sahaba are like stars and you can follow any one of them. This hadith is not accurate. It doesn't make any sense. That Sahabi kan nujum. بِأَيِّهِمَ اقْتَدَيْتُمْ اِهْتَدَيْتُمْ. It's not an accurate, doesn't make sense, this hadith, yes? That all my Sahabi are like stars, you can follow any one of them and you will be guided aright. It could be possible that the Prophet is sitting, yes, in a group of 4 or 5 people and somebody asks and he says, all my Sahabi, meaning only those 5, are like stars. Everyone, any one of them you follow, you'll be guided aright. If we can find that context and we can say the hadith is right. But without a context, this hadith doesn't make sense. It's like we saying that all the angels did sajda to Adam. It's not true. They didn't. Only the angels that were present there, only the angels that were present in the story of Adam and the earth, they did sajda. The rest of the angels don't even know Adam has been created. The rest of the angels of other universes, of other dimensions, Imam Sadiq says that there are angels who are so immersed in the worship of God, they don't even know Adam has been created. So we can't be that naive. There's a art of interpretation. So all the angels prostrated means all the angels involved at that point. Yes? So all the Sahabis are like star means probably all the Sahabis that were gathered around him at that time. Not all Sahabis, otherwise the hadith does not make sense. What kind of interest was Rabawi prevalent at the time of the Quran? If you look at the Quran, it says do not consume interest several folds over. Yes? That's a sort of interest that cripples the society. I don't know if anybody's watched Mother India, where we take 100 rupees, but our children and grandchildren go into bondage because every time it compounds and multiplies. Those were the levels of interest that those people used to practice back in the day. Majority of the interest that is practiced today in the Western world at least is socially productive. It's good type of interest. It's not that evil type of interest. But yes, even in this world, when countries lend to poor countries, it is that evil type of an interest that cripples those countries. So I'm not outruling that that level of interest doesn't exist, but just because the name is interest does not make it interest in essence. Yes? In yesterday's lecture you mentioned that we should use our intuition to guide us about the established laws of Islam, but where do we draw the line? For example, in today's day and age, my intuition tells me that people that are in love should be together, gay people. What are your thoughts on guiding our intuition? And I can possibly guess where that's coming from as well. Now, the way I use intuition is this, that my children are doing one Eid and I'm doing another Eid. My intuition says this is nonsense. Yes? My intuition says this is nonsense. You can't have 2 Eids. My neighbor can't be doing one and I can be doing another. That's not right. Intuition. My intuition tells me that just because I don't put the name of a person between me and my God, God will not accept my prayer. My intuition tells me this is crazy. It doesn't sound right at all. My intuition just tells me that when my Hindu friend brings me some food, I will eat it. That it is najis and it is this and that. My intuition doesn't make sense of it because that Hindu is God-centric, is a lover of God. My intuition tells me that I can't cut heads of 1,000 sheep in Mina and leave them to rot there. It doesn't make sense. God cannot be wasteful. Yes? This is the thing that my intuition tells me. Now, a married woman falls in love with a young man. They're terribly in love. Do they go and live together and marry each other? My intuition tells me that she should get a divorce, but not transgress on the right of her husband, because that's a contract that's been made. If two gay people are in love with each other, to be very honest with you, I'm willing to learn if there are substantive arguments to convince me. Okay? But for now, I believe that when the Prophet of Islam gave certain rules and regulations, they were value-based. They were value-based. It wasn't the case that the Prophet did not know that gay lifestyle existed beyond his community, but he promoted a heterosexual lifestyle in his community. And when we read his hadith, we know that there is some existential benefit there. But at the same time, the Prophet was extremely sympathetic. He did not curse, condemn. And the Quran does not condemn gays in that emphatic manner that it condemns zina. Yes? So what I'm saying to you is, okay, I'm open. If there's any argument that you can bring, I would like to think about it. I'm still trying to learn and trying to arrive at the truth. But to the best of my knowledge, gays are not evil people. They are the most loveliest people ever. The Prophet of Islam did not condone such a lifestyle. And to the best of my understanding, this is what I have understood, that this is what the Prophet of Islam said, and if he has said something and there is no counter argument, then I would dare not exceed on what my Prophet has said. So at this point, this is my own limitation. Difference between zakat and khums. Ayatollah Muntaziri described zakat as welfare tax and khums as state tax. Khums in the Quran has been 20% of whatever booty that has been received through warfare and battle. Later on the Imam said ghanimtum can mean any gain. It's not only in warfare. So everything has 20% tax, yes? And the Quran gives 6 extensions to khums. Allah, Rasul, Zawil Qurba, Yatama, Masakin and Ibn Sabil. One of the Imams was asked that what if one of the extension is missing? The Imam said, then it's my choice, I can give it to anybody else. But these are 6 extensions. And the Prophet in his time used to do the same thing when the gain spoils of war used to come. He used to take 5th and used to split it into 6 and give it in 6 ways. But before the Prophet of Islam came, khums was 1/4. It's 1/5 in Islam, khums, yes? It used to be 1/4, where the head of the tribe used to take 1/4 of everything that the tribe gained and exclusively keep it to himself. Quran came and made it into 1/5 and gave it to 6 extension as opposed to only the head. So Sheikh Muntaziri's view was that it is a state tax belonging to the head of the state, at the head of state's discretion, as opposed to zakat, which is a welfare tax. Then said Khomeini said, he said, look, these distributions are not really hard and fast. If you feel it belongs in one place, give it there, all of it. If you feel it belongs in another place, give it there. My own views, if anybody wants to know, ask me tomorrow and I'll tell you on khums and on zakat. If that's all, then let us recite Surah Fatiha.